Great week so far. Hope you're having a great brand new month of June so far. If you thought somehow that in 2020 a new month would bring something new, you were you were right, and I hope you start to think more specifically and make your prayers specific, because the world just keeps spiraling out of control. It is unbelievable. There are so many things that are going on right now, from man-made situations to natural situations that are just, look, we're setting ourselves up and our world is going absolute crazy right now. And in all of that, we as Christians, we have an important role to play. And so I want to encourage you today, very specifically in the role that we as Christians can play in times like this. You know, this is not brand new. Everything that we're seeing right now is either new or it seems new, but circumstances like this are not new. This isn't nothing new to the world, and it is for us a little bit. We've never seen anything quite like this, with this many things back to back to back, and so much going on right now. But man, the world has been through seasons like this before, and things like pretty much everything that we're seeing right now has happened before. And Christians have played a key and vital role for decades and centuries of helping the world navigate these times. And so there's a huge responsibility on us, but we can't do what we're supposed to do if we're paralyzed by the fear or the anxiety that is natural in situations like this for us as human beings. But I really think will stall our progress and disable us from engaging in and being able to engage in what God has designed for us to do. The other night I was reading a story to Oak on the couch, and Autumn was passing through. She was supposed to be putting away her laundry, and she heard it. She froze, right? Because I was telling a story. I was reading a book. And so as she froze, then she kind of drifted toward us, and then she ended up on the couch with us. And then Arbor came through, and Arbor, same thing, right? Arbor's supposed to be putting away her toys, and she heard it, and instantly she was drawn to it, right? Because Autumn and Oakley were there, and it was a story. And we as human beings are drawn to crowds. We're drawn to places where someone is sharing, right? Where someone is teaching, where someone is talking. It's why we like both, it depends on who you are, right? You probably like either riots or rallies. We as human beings, it's why we all wanted to be in church on Sunday, right? It's why we all want to be able to gather at, you can watch a football game at your house, and you can have all the amenities and the air conditioning, the biggest TV. But if you're watching it alone, it's not nearly as incredible as if you're watching it with your friends. And that's still not as great to be in the stadium and feel the energy of the crowd, right? Because we as people, we need that. We want that. We're drawn to that. Well, Jesus is in a situation in Matthew chapter 5 where he kind of sees what's going on. He knows that we as people are drawn to crowds. And so he pulls away from the crowd, but he positions himself in a spot where he can still address the crowd. And it's Matthew chapter 5, and this is the Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus's most popular block of teaching. And it says at the beginning of Matthew 5 that Jesus actually, he had called his disciples, he had done some healing, and then he goes and he goes up on the mountainside, and he calls his disciples to him. So he starts teaching his disciples. But he's strategically placed in a location at the top of a valley that is almost like an amphitheater. It would have magnified his voice to where everyone in the crowds was also hearing. So he's teaching his disciples, and he's got these crowds that he's also allowing into this private conversation. And they're just drawn to it, right? People come and they come and they come. And what we see is that Jesus starts to explain the kingdom of God. He starts to explain what it looks like for a believer, a follower of the way to live, the way that they live, the way that that this whole life looks like, what we are supposed to do, what we are not supposed to do, things that come for people that are, the Beatitudes, right? Is blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those that are peacemakers, right? He goes through these things, and he kind of flips what we know about the world on its head. He takes the things that were and says, those are the things that were. Those are the things of the world. That's the way the world works. And here's how the kingdom of God works. And so as he goes on, he talks about, giving to the poor, to the needy, spending time with God in prayer, fasting, storing up our treasures in heaven rather than on earth, amassing wealth and success and prosperity, all those things. And he says, look, man, be prosperous in the kingdom of God. Forget about being prosperous here, right? And then he goes into do not worry. And don't be anxious about all these things, right? All the things that he taught about so far, all these things. Don't worry about what we're going to eat. Don't worry about what we're going to wear, right? He's talking about the material possessions that we have, this day-to-day focus that we have on life here. And he gets to a verse that we know, and you've probably heard before, and it's in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. He says, but seek first his kingdom, God's kingdom, and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. We live in that world, right? Each day has enough trouble as its own. We don't need to try to predict what the next, I know some people are trying to play like apocalypse bingo and try like, you've seen the memes. Who had super volcano for June, because there's like volcanoes happen, or earthquakes happening all over Yosemite right now, like, right? We don't need to worry about what's going to happen, because our circumstances, the things that are surrounding us right now in our world, although this is nothing new to the world, this has happened for hundreds of years, thousands of years. We as Christians have a different response, and if we're not careful, we will let the human nature in us override the spiritual nature that God has given us, right? The human nature says, oh my gosh, we don't know what's going on. My retirement was in the stock market. Like, I check my stocks daily. I'm trying to see my portfolio, see if I'm, starting to get back some of the money that I lost. How am I going to be able to retire? Oh my gosh, am I going to have a job? How are we going to be able to sustain our family? Like, are we going to be safe? Am I going to be able to drive downtown tomorrow? Is there going to be a protest, or is there going to be a riot? Oh my gosh, if a super volcano goes off, like, how do you prep for that? You can't prep for that. That might throw us into an ice age. We can get so overwhelmed with all this stuff that's going on that we lose sight of what Jesus told us, which is that we should be seeking first the kingdom of God, right? The kingdom of God and his righteousness. His righteousness, by the way, is Jesus. Jesus is the righteousness of God. And he tells us, look, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. The kingdom of God is us bringing people to God and making them into a right relationship with him through sharing the gospel with them. The good news that Jesus has paid the price for their sin. They have been forgiven. And then he tells us to seek Jesus, seek his righteousness, and everything else is going to be added unto us, right? Charles Spurgeon, one of the great theologians of time, had a great quote on anxiety, and it really goes with this passage in Matthew 6. And he said, anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It only empties today of its strength, right? Anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It only empties today of its strength. And there's a real truth to that, which is that, see, anxiety, it can be spurred on, it can be ignited, it can be focused on the circumstances around us, the real temporal circumstances. But reality is that anxiety is an internal issue. Anxiety happens in our mind. Anxiety happens in our heart. That's why Proverbs tells us that what a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Right? And so that's why Paul tells us we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. Think on the things that are pure and lovely and holy and good, and everything that's praiseworthy and excellent. Think on these things. The Bible addresses how we address our anxiety, and it's by focusing on what Jesus said, the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Not being overwhelmed with the circumstances of this world. Not being consumed with the fear of what may happen. But being focused on the kingdom, being focused on being, we talked before about, in Matthew Matthew, about being the light of the world, right? Being the salt of the earth, right? We as followers of Jesus are the light of the world. We as followers of Jesus are the salt of this earth. And that means that we as followers of Jesus have a different message, which is not, oh my gosh, the world's going crazy and we need to panic and freak out. Oh my gosh, we have no idea what's going on. Oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? Oh my goodness, how are we going to make it? Jesus says, look, seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And everything else he's going to take care of. He is going to take care of your needs. He is a good father. He loves you. He cares for you. And he wants to give you not just the basics, but he wants to provide for you, give you good gifts. And so for us as Christians, man, if we focus on those things and we focus on, like Paul said, everything that is good and pure and lovely and holy and righteous and praiseworthy and excellent. And if we believe the reality of what God told us in Proverbs, that so a man thinks in his heart, or what a man thinks in his heart, so he is. And if we would think about the goodness that God is, really just the goodness that God is, right? And what God has done in our lives. And we focus on the good that he wants to bring to other lives through the gospel, then, man, all of the other things are going to take care of themselves, right? The anxiety, your anxiety is not going to solve the sorrows of tomorrow, but it will drain you of the strength for today. And the strength that you have today is important because the message that you have, the message that I have, the message that we as followers of Jesus have is important because it liberates the people. It sets people free. It sets people free from sin. It sets people free from death. It sets people free from their anxiety. It sets people free from the cares and the worries of this world because we walk around and we live and exist because of the Spirit of God that's within us that brings peace and comfort and joy. And so you have that message. Don't let the fear of tomorrow, the worries of tomorrow, drain your strength from today where you're ineffective in sharing the gospel, the goodness, the righteousness of God, which is Jesus. Because, man, people need it more now than they have ever needed it in history. And we need it just as bad as anyone ever has. Because, yeah, the world's crazy.